This episode contains discussions of mental health. Listen at your own discretion. It is Monday, the 26th of August, 2024. My name is Pigeon Rose, and this is my song of the day. Welcome to another week of Pigeon's Song of the Day. This week's theme is the late, great Daniel Johnston. Not the album, The Late Great Daniel Johnston, just about the late great Daniel Johnston. He was a musician from Austin, Texas. I've covered one of his songs on here before. We talked about True Love Will Find You in the End, and I gave background about him then, but I'll give you another rundown here because we're going to be spending a whole week on him. He was a musician from Austin, Texas. He suffered from bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. He had many mental health issues throughout the years. He did drugs. He was in and out of psych wards. He had a religious fixation on the idea that he was going to be possessed by the devil, which is a very troubled life this man led. But he was also a musician, and a very enthusiastic one. He played piano and chord organ. Later on, he learned guitar, and he sang, and he wrote these lyrics that were just like, they're really creative, and it says a lot. I mean, there's this whole obsession with tortured artists, and he has songs about that whole idea as well. But like, Daniel Johnston isn't a good musician because he suffered, but his suffering gave him a very unique point of view that makes his music very interesting. His lyrics are very creative and unique, and he has a lot of weird sci-fi imagery. He did a whole thing about space ducks. He has recurring characters and recurring names. He has a lot of those characters are metaphors for himself, like whenever he talks about Casper the Friendly Ghost, he's talking about himself. Same with Joe the boxer. But in the case of the song we're doing today, it's a song called Grievances, and it's the first song in his first album, so it's a very good place to start. That first album is called Songs of Pain. It was released in 1980. I think it just perfectly introduces you. It's the perfect introduction to Daniel Johnston, and it makes sense. It's the first song in his first album. It gives you everything you need to know about his themes. It introduces characters. We're just going to listen to it. I will warn you, Daniel's recordings are very lo-fi. At least they were before the 2000s. He largely recorded them like in his living room on a boombox. So if you don't like hearing recording hiss and stuff and microphone clipping, you're probably not going to like this week of episodes, unfortunately. But I love this guy's music, and it's my show, so fuck you. We're going to listen to the song now and come back in a few minutes and talk about it. It really does feel like such an introduction because it starts with him clearing his throat. It's like, okay, I'm ready to go on stage. Yeah, that's Grievances by Daniel Johnston from Songs of Pain. I think it really sets you up immediately for his style, jamming away on the piano. Quite a like upbeat sort of melody. You know, quite a jaunty tune. And the lyrics are about a librarian that he has a crush on. People know that songwriters draw from their own experiences. They also sometimes make things up, but this was entirely a true thing. There was a woman named Laurie who was a librarian, and Daniel had an infatuation with her, and he wrote a lot of songs about her or that referenced her, and this is the very first one. She's the librarian mentioned, and she later married an undertaker, which is referenced in the second verse. We'll get into that as we go through it, but it is interesting that the very first song on his first album immediately introduces you to Laurie, who becomes, you know, she's an important part of his mythology, so to speak. It also introduces us right away to his catchphrase, although it might not be necessarily evident that it was his catchphrase in this song, but that was, "Hi, how are you?" Oh, I said it so Irishly just now. "Hi, how are you?" is how he would say it. That was his whole thing. He was like a really charming guy. He would go up to people and say, "Hi, how are you? I'm Daniel Johnston," and then he'd hand them one of his tapes. And it's just like, here's have some free music. And that was like his whole thing. He later released an album called Hi, How Are You? It's a great album. There's a drawing of Jeremiah the Frog on it, who the Frog of Innocence, I think, but Innocence is spelt wrong, if I remember correctly, which is of course a reference to Jeremiah was a bullfrog. Anyway, so I'll talk about how this kind of ties into Daniel's overall thing as we go through the lyrics. So let's do that now. "If I had my own way, you'd be with me here today, but I rarely have my own way. I guess that's why you're not here with me today. And the librarian said you can't buy no respect. I said, hey lady, what can you expect when I'm lying on the floor? I mean, yeah, right away. If I had my own way, you'd be with me here today, but I rarely have my own way. Guess that's why you're not here with me today. Very plain and simple. I've said before, I love really straightforward lyrics like that kind of subvert your expectations by not being exceptional, if that makes sense. I mean, the obvious one is the Mountain Goats lyric from Going to Georgia. The most remarkable thing about you standing in the doorway is that it's you and you're standing in the doorway. Or different Mountain Goats one, and John Darnielle loves this trope. On the morning when I woke up without you for the first time, I was cold, so I put on a sweater and I turned up the heat. I just love really really like mundane, simple lyrics like that because you expect something more poetic, and it just gives you something very simple, and it's quite relatable in that way. And so he's talking about like, I wish you were here with me, but you're not, so I guess my wish didn't come true. It's very straightforward. And the librarian said you can't buy no respect. It's an interesting thing to say. I don't know what specific conversation he's referencing, that they can't buy no respect. It is important to note, by the way, probably because of the way Daniel's mind works, or worked, I should mention that he did indeed pass in 2019, unfortunately. Not too long after I started listening to him. I think I started listening to him in like 2016, 17? Anyway. Oh, actually, that's a good point. I never talked about how I discovered Daniel Johnston. It's a really stupid story, actually. I was watching a Neil Cicierega video. No, I was watching like a Max Picao video, I think. And, he often collaborated with Neil. Someone asked if the music in the background was an accordion cover of Walking the Cow by Daniel Johnston. And he was like, I don't think Max replied. I think someone else replied, but they're like, no, it's actually just this accordion track that Neil recorded at some point. And here's the link to it. So I was like, okay, but wait, what the fuck is Walking the Cow? So I went and looked that up and really liked it. And that's how I discovered Daniel Johnston. I discovered him through someone thinking that an original song was a cover of one of his songs, which is really stupid, but here we are. Anyway, what I was going to say was, because of the way Daniel Johnston's mind works, he referenced his own songs a lot. And I mentioned he had recurring characters, but like also just like specific lines, clearly lyrics he liked or resonated with, showed up a lot. He actually released an album called Respect later, and this librarian said you can't buy no respect line is also referenced in Casper the Friendly Ghost, which I mentioned earlier. Nobody treated him That's the second time Audacity has crashed in the middle of recording. Thanks, Audacity. Luckily, it saved everything. Anyway, nobody treated him nice while he was alive. You can't buy no respect, like the librarian said. So yeah, he had these recurring themes and recurring lines, and this is one of them. This is the introduction of one of them. Incidentally, the idea of Grievances, which is the title of this song, he later did a different recording of this song called Grievances Revisited, which was on his album More Songs of Pain from 1983. He also has a song called Don't Let the Sun Go Down Your Grievances. So, all these recurring themes being introduced here. Then, you're a lovely lady, but you don't want to be no girl of mine. Well, the only thing you ever done for me was help me waste my time. And I saw you at the funeral. You were standing there like a temple. I said, hi, how are you? Hello. And I pulled up a casket and crawled in. Yes, I did. So, it's interesting the way he kind of phrases it. You're a lovely lady, but you don't want to be no girl of mine. Well, the only thing you ever done for me was help me waste my time. It feels very, spiteful, kind of wounded, He's saying that she's nice, but also saying that she's a waste of time. And it's this clear kind of, conflicting nature of, not wanting to actually be mean because he still clearly cares about her, but also recognizing that she doesn't want him, and so he's hurt, right? And then, I saw you at the funeral. So that sounds so out of context, but the truth is that she married an undertaker, and I have a quote here. I'll just read it. So there's a documentary from 2005 called The Devil and Daniel Johnston. If you want to learn more about Daniel, watch it. Be prepared. It's so fucking depressing. Because it's about this guy's hard life, and it's such a mix of people who either didn't know what to do with him or clearly just milked him for money. It's a whole wild thing. Anyway, this is the quote from Daniel talking about this in The Devil and Daniel Johnston. As soon as she spoke to me, she was so nice, and I was completely madly in love, and I didn't know it, but she already had a boyfriend. At this time, Pete Erner went to mortician school in Florida, and so he left mortician school and came back. After she got married, a friend of mine's grandfather died, and the funeral was at Erner's funeral home. She was there hanging coats, and as soon as I walked in, I said, hi, how are you? And I shook her hand. I looked behind her, and there was an empty casket, and I just thought, well, I'm just gonna crawl in there. So he's talking about how, he goes to this funeral, and he sees this woman that he was infatuated with, and he greets her with his standard, hi, how are you? And he's so fucking embarrassed that he feels like he'll just die on the spot, so he says, I'm gonna go crawl into that casket there. And it's unclear if he meant that literally, but I think he's saying is that he died of embarrassment figuratively, right? Climbed up a mountain and I looked around, some kind of circus with all them clowns. I said, hey, wait a minute, can we slow down a bit? And I almost got hit by a truck. Well, it just goes to show you that we're all on our own, scrounging for our own share of good luck. Stab your brother in the back and pick up your paycheck. So the verses are really personal and specific, and then the bridge goes real broad and universal, saying, this gave me a perspective on life, and I know that everything's shit and everyone betrays each other because of this rejection from this woman, right? Some kind of circus with all them clowns is great. Also, I almost got hit by a truck, he says. Also made into its own song and yip junk music. I think it's called Almost Get Hit by a Truck. And then, yeah, that whole stab your brother in the back and pick up your paycheck. Very sad when you know about the way that his managers abused him and, well, abused might be the wrong word, but manipulated him and kind of used him for money, you know. And then the final verse, goodbye, lonely heart drawings, you never did work anyhow. I'm looking for a nice girl and I don't want no cow. I'm heading out west, gonna find me the best. Well, I played the game, but I failed the test. If I can't be a lover, then I'll be a pest. Yes, I will. Goodbye, lonely heart drawings, you never did work anyhow. I just imagine him tearing them up, being like, well, this is pointless. I'm looking for a nice girl and I don't want no cow. That sounds like such a shocking lyric, and he could mean it. I'm not discounting that. He could be legitimately calling Laurie a cow, but I very much doubt it considering his feelings for her. So what I'm thinking is he has a different song, again referencing another song that we haven't even heard yet. It's like 3 albums later, more even. He has a song called Walking the Cow, as I mentioned it earlier, the song I discovered him through. I'm going to be talking about that song later this week, so I won't go too in depth with it, but the idea of walking the cow is Daniel's idea of, well, airing out your grievances, kind of like meeting your responsibilities. You're walking the cow, you're doing the thing you don't want to do, you know? And so you could think of the comparison here being that he wants a nice girl and he doesn't want someone who's like a burden, a responsibility that he doesn't want to take on walks, you know what I'm saying? So he could be using a genuine sexist insult, or he could be comparing her to a burden, which is still mean, but it seems more in character for him because of the way he likes to reference his own lyrics, you know? And then, if I can't be a lover, then I'll be a pest is such an... It's certainly a statement. It's very incel, isn't it? But I mean, that sums it up, really. If I can't be a lover, then I'll be a pest, because he kept talking to Laurie. They talk to her in The Devil and Daniel Johnston, and I can't get a read on how she thinks about I think she just finds it really weird, but she doesn't dislike him or anything. I wouldn't know, frankly. But anyway, I just think this song is such a great introduction to Daniel, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the week when we talk about him. It's going to be up and down and up and down and up and down. And we're also going to be talking about covers of his songs as well. I don't know any covers of this one off the top of my head, but there's been plenty of covers. This guy is not that well known, but he's well known by musicians, and there's a lot of famous musicians who have covered his stuff, like fucking Tom Waits, Bright Eyes, Glenn Hansard, Phoebe Bridgers, you know, lots of very famous people have covered his songs, and I'll be talking about the covers when we get to those songs. Walking the Cow, in fact, was covered by TV on the radio, but we'll get there. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. Please leave a comment, hit like, hit subscribe, tell other people about the show. Look into Daniel Johnston if you want to. We'll be talking about him over the coming week. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Break it down.
Which is, of course, a reference to Jeremiah was a bullfrog. I like how I pulled the microphone so far away from myself to do that, and the audio level didn't change, which tells me just how loud I was. Oy, oy, oy. He wants a nice girl, and he doesn't want someone who's like a burden, a responsibility. Oh, excuse me.